you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope everyone is doing well today. Happy Tuesday. We have a great session for you all today. We are just going to give about a minute for people to come on in to this session as they're exiting the previous session, I should say. So please hang tight for about a minute. I hope everyone is having a great day so far. Maybe you can start off and let us know in the chat box where you're from. If you're bringing in some heat or some cold. I'm in Chicago and I'm bringing a little bit of both. I have the sun is out, but it's still in the 30s. We're also going to ask if you can turn off your cameras for this session. We will have you turn your cameras back on when we send you to a breakout session within this presentation so that you can engage with your peers. So if you can turn off your cameras and mute yourselves for right now, that would be great. It'll help with a little bit of the bandwidth. I see a lot more people coming in. I want to make sure that everyone's here so that we can hear from our wonderful speaker today. So I'm just going to wait one more, maybe 15 seconds and see what happens here. Okay, everyone, I'm going to kick off this session. I know we still have people coming in, but we want to make sure that you get to hear from our awesome speaker today. Thank you for joining our session on Unpacking Trauma to Promote Purpose with Arlinda Davis. My name is Veronica Calvo, and I am with Inspire. In case you just came in, we would just ask that you turn off your cameras and mute yourself. Once you get onto the breakout session later on in the session, we'll ask you to turn your cameras on and unmute yourself so that you can engage with your colleagues. Also, we have provided a note catcher document for this session. It's located under the session description on the Attendee Hub, and it's going to serve two purposes. One, to guide your learning during this session, and the other is to use as discussion prompts in the breakout. So if you have any questions or anything like that, please write in the chat box and we will answer those questions. So right now, I would like to introduce you to our speaker today, Ms. Arlinda Davis. We United States Teacher Ambassador and first grade teacher at We Schools in Avondale. We are super excited to have Arlinda here with us today. Given to time constraints, please review her bio in the event platform at your convenience. So it's a pleasure to introduce you to Arlinda.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I'm here to present some of the things that I have learned about how to problem solve, how we can find ways to help our children unpack the trauma that they bring to us, that backpack full of trauma that they have. And we're going to get in and we're going to also discuss some things about how do we do this while we're experiencing COVID. So I want you to take a look at this picture. And in the chat box, I would like you to tell me from A, B, C, or D, which one of these students do you think, or which one of these people do you think comes from an inner city school? Just type A, B, C, or D. Which one do you believe comes from an inner city school? And as you look at this and you're typing in the chat, I want you to look at the faces, and we want to say to ourselves, how do we see children? What do we see? Who do we think actually experiences trauma? And a lot of times we associate trauma being only for children or for students who are poor or in inner city school. And I kind of coined this phrase called trauma has no zip code. And the reason why I coined that is because sometimes we think of trauma only being for a specific zip code, for a specific socioeconomic group. And so the actual students who are part of an inner city school are A, B, and C. So if you also look at this, I want you now to look and just think. You don't have to type it in the chat box, but one of these students, they come from two-parent home, and their parents are both in one is an aero engineer, and the other is a person who was a supervisor at a telephone company. And they raised their children. They had 4 children in suburbia America. And so when we look at the faces of these children, they all have a story. And so the actual child who came from the inner city school again was A, B, and C. The student who came from the two-parent family was D. So in A, we see this young man, and he actually experienced some trauma where he was going to school, and his trauma was not from home. At school, he would get there, and he had children that were boys that were bigger than him, and they were bullying him. And the PE coach actually caught one day that they had put him in the ground. They were hitting him with sticks and calling him names. Student B actually came from a situation where in his kindergarten year at school, he was very quiet. He had anxiety attacks. He was having such a problem assimilating to school. And when he came to first grade, he would stutter and he had problems expressing himself. Student C is a person who she had her trauma. It actually came from home. She had a parent, they were separated, they would argue all the time, and he actually dislocated her ankle trying to pull her out of the car to make him go with her. And finally, with D, this student was a person who was in school. She was labeled to be having some difficulties and special needs. And when she got to 5th grade, that teacher told her, "Did you know that you were a genius?" And when he told her that, it actually launched her into finding her purpose. And that's what we're going to do today. Student D is me. I experienced this trauma, and that's why it became my passion. And this is how we're going to see what trauma looks like, and not have that opinion that always some people think that it's just for inner city children. So we say this, scars tell a story. I used to have a funny story about a scar I had on me, and people would say, "How did you get that?" And I would say, "Oh, I was riding my bike and I hit a rock and I fell." And when I told that story, it was a story that was related to that scar. And if you've ever been in a situation where you hurt yourself, and you didn't know it until later, and you felt and you said, ouch, that hurt. What did I do? You had displaced that pain. You might have burnt yourself or cut yourself, and you put the pain in the back of your head, and you didn't think about it later until it came out, and you were like, ouch. That's how it is with children in trauma. With children in trauma, they may have been experiencing things, and that ouch doesn't come out until they're in your class. They're sitting there, they're being disruptive, or they are bothering other people, or they're just extremely quiet. But they have that displaced pain or that displaced trauma that they put back for so long, and now all of a sudden they're sitting in your class and the ouch comes out. When we think about trauma, and we look at this picture, and we see that a lot of times they have this backpack, and this backpack is bigger and it's heavier than they are. And in order for us to create productive citizens in a classroom environment, we as educators have to help these children unpack some of the things that they're dealing with in order for them to feel safe. If you look at the backpack, it's not just always abuse. It's not just always dealing with a parent who's a drug addict. Sometimes that the trauma comes from within our schools by other children, or it may come from just an anxiety that they have because they don't feel safe in school. They don't feel safe enough to participate. And so even tests, giving tests to children who may be they have this special gift, and they can do things in your classroom, but when you give them that test, they shut down. A lot of times that's a type of trauma for that child. So there's a story, and in the story, a person was carrying a cup. And when they bumped into a person, what was in that cup spilled out. And someone said, well, why did you spill the coffee in that cup? And they said to them, because there was coffee in the cup. And then they said, had it been tea, tea would have spilled out. Whatever was in that cup when you bumped me would have spilled out. And teachers, you're kind of like that saucer that's underneath that cup. You have to catch all the things that these children have, all the trauma that they have coming in. It might be anger. It may be hurt. It may be frustration. So let's think about what's in their cup. Now, we're not trying to transform the cup because the cup is who they are. We're trying to transform what's within that cup. And so sometimes, you have to add a little sugar, or you have to add a little milk, or you have to add something to that cup to make that what's inside that child or what's inside that cup better. And so one of the things we want to do is look and see what's inside of that child's cup. I think about back in the 80s and the 90s, how we had Transformers, and the Transformers would transform to be great, but they never changed. We didn't change who the Transformer was. The Transformer actually was changed to something to accomplish that greatness, to go towards their purpose. And so I'm asking you to think about, when you get that child, what's in that cup. And you being that saucer, you don't have to, when you catch all this stuff and you're having to deal with it as a teacher, y'all are there to support kids, but you're human too. And so when you're catching all that, that sometimes will get into your spirit, and it will get into what you're doing in your class, and you're trying to actually help that child become inherit society. So let's look at, how do we change what's in their cup? My kids play a game called Imposter Among Us. And so these are some things that you can look at, and you can see when you identify these things. These are things that children may display to you to say, I'm having problems. There's something going on at home. They may be tired. They may be frustrated. They may have anger issues. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to look at scenarios to see, how do we address the things that they are having, things that are going on, and why they're displacing. We're looking at the why. because the things that children do in your classroom aren't always who they are. It's what they're feeling. And so when you go back, if you see this and review it, you can see some of the things that children would display to you to say, look at me, I have a problem, I need help, I'm bothered by this. And once we unpack that trauma, and once we address that, then we can have a successful classroom. So I want you to think and type in the chat box if you think anxiety equals trauma, or does trauma equal anxiety? And if you look at some of these things that are going on, we're going to look and see which one is which. It's kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg. So which came first? Is it anxiety that equals trauma, or is it trauma that equals anxiety? So when we look at this, sometimes that child who is very quiet, this says, someone told me only those who care about you can hear you when you're quiet. And so one of the things we have to look at is some of those children who are super quiet out there, and we're labeling, oh, that's my great child, that's my good child, that's my well-behaved student. And so they often get overlooked because they're quiet. I was that quiet child. I was that child who sat in the classroom and the teacher would call, ask questions, and I would whisper the answer. And when I whispered the answer, it's because I was afraid of who they thought I was, because they had already labeled me as being inadequate. They had already labeled me as having some developmental problems. And when that one teacher noticed my quiet and turned my quiet into greatness, then I knew right then that I had to change my own way that I presented myself so people would see me. So a lot of times you have to look at that child that's very quiet and not just look at the child who's always disruptive to find out what's going on. So our whole purpose today is for us to learn how to find out the why behind what's going on with the child, the why behind why this child is coming in hungry, or why the child is coming in sleepy. So we have two scenarios here. If you look at the first scenario, it says, Julie is an 8-year-old girl who participates in class but falls asleep every day. This continues each day, and she's missing her morning reading, and she's falling behind in instruction. The teacher feels as if she's being a little lazy, and she wakes her up each day. Julie's grades aren't high in reading, but they're higher in other areas. Julie comes from a 2-parent home with 2 younger siblings. Not only is she sleeping a lot, Julie cries when her teacher raises her voice. After talking with the teacher, she finds out her parents are divorcing and are arguing at night. So if you look in this scenario, what would be Julie's why? If you type in the chat box, what do you think is her why? Why do you think she is sleeping? Then if you look at scenario 2, it's a different situation where the child is not sleeping or being quiet, but you have John who's in 4th grade and he's a bright student, but some students complain that John is actually being a bully and is taking their snacks and food at lunch. The teacher catches him taking extra snacks, yet he still continues to do that. He goes to the nurse with a stomach ache or stomach pains each day. The teacher writes John up and he gets 3 days for bullying and for theft. When he returns, he continues to take more snacks. And so sometimes we'll look at a child like John and we'll think John is a bully. He's taking other people's stuff, and immediately we'll look at him as being a thief. But then if you look at his why, you will find out that John may be hungry. Those 3 days John got at home, John might not have food at home those 3 days. So when he came back to school, he was stealing snacks and taking things because his need, his trauma was hunger. And so we need to think about how can we take what John's trauma is and transform him to greatness? How can we help him with that? This part of Inspire's trauma module. And with the trauma module, they often look at, when you go in, they'll have a true false questionnaire to help you kind of see what you're going to be working on. And so with this scenario, or with this discussion, we're going to look at the true false. Veronica, before we move on to that, what were some of the things that they said in this scenario as far as what was going on with our first scenario?
Hi, Arlinda. This is Veronica. I'm not monitoring the chat because I'm going through the thing. Right. But what I'm reading right now is motivating by hunger, maybe lack of sleep, yes, maybe he has no food.
I can read the audience responses. This is Kelly. Would you like me to read you some of these responses? The audience says she cannot sleep at night hearing the arguments. There's neglect, deprivation syndrome, not getting breakfast. Arlinda? And Veronica, are you still on?
I'm still on.
Ladies and gentlemen, while we're waiting for our speaker to come back.
She might have been disconnected.
I'm here.
Wait, yay, awesome.
When I went to look in the chat, I think I must have hit something. I'm so sorry. But yes, I did begin to hear you before you went out. And I had been looking at some of the answers in the chat. And those are great answers to that, because her being upset and being afraid of the voice, being loud, maybe because she listened to the arguments. So I appreciate everyone who put that in the chat. So now we're looking at the discussion for true and false. And we look at number 1, where it says teachers should be prepared to be tough on traumatized students, since they will often use their trauma history as an excuse. Do you think that's true or false? And you can just look at that and decide if you think it'll be good, or is that another way of being traumatizing that student? Number 2, a helpful intervention for a traumatized student might be to check in with him at the beginning of an activity to make sure he understands direction. That all falls under safety. And if you look at the word intervention, that is going to be a key piece to your answer. And then number 3, I actually have a question mark by that, because it says in order to dispel the idea that trauma-related topics are taboo and shameful, the teacher should begin by inviting students to share traumatic events. I wasn't sure if that was true or false. Someone may think it's a good idea, but we're going to talk about that in a second. And then finally, there's a helpful intervention for a traumatized student might be to work with him to develop a bank of words that can be used to describe how he's feeling.
These are all great discussions, Arlinda. I'm sure we're going to have awesome conversation when we get them, the participants, into those breakout sessions.
Yes, definitely. So looking at this true false slide, we see that number 1 was false, and we see that number 2 was true. And I did put a question by number 3, because I don't believe that it's a way of doing that. You want to develop some type of relationship with that child so that you become their confidant, but actually maybe talking about it among their peers and with others out loud may also end up being traumatic for them. And then number 4 is false.
Number 4 is true or false?
Number 4 is false. I'm sorry, number 4 is true.
Oh,
Yes, true. All right, so in order to reach them, in order to teach them, we have to reach them. And so we're just going to look at these 6 elements of trauma informed care, and those being safety, trustworthiness, like we just talked about, peer support, collaboration, empowerment, giving them a voice, using those words, and then finally looking at their culture and their history. This is just a picture of my classroom, a place in my classroom where I try to provide a safe place where they have pillows and they have a place they can go and collaborate with their peers. I have a refrigerator for those children who would come in who often be hungry in the morning so that they can get something to eat and a snack and they can go ahead and be ready for today. I also have mobiles hanging from my ceiling because, you know, when we were babies, and they would put us in our crib, they would have the mobile, and that's calming. So I have that in my classroom, and this is just an example. So I wanted to do this slide before we go into breakout, and it's based on peer support. And so in this picture, you see Dr. King, and out in the audience was Mahalia Jackson. Dr. King had a speech ready, and as he got ready to do his speech, Mahalia yelled from the audience, "Tell him about the dream, doctor, tell him about the dream." And so he set his speech that he had to the side, and he began to improv and do the speech about his dream. And so with peer support, we have to help our children know how to be a support for each other sometimes, because those children often can redirect their peers to a great path. If we give students the opportunity to find their greatness within them, and that day Mahalia was Dr. King's push towards greatness. He had greatness in him, and what she said actually helped bring that out. And so within your classroom, it's a real good idea to have children, have peer support, to have them to be able to talk to each other and to actually even magnify the great things that they like about each other. And finally, we have SEL empowers children. It gives them a voice. So if you are using an SEL program, that's a great way to help children with trauma, because you're giving them the words and you're giving them ways to express their emotions, and you're giving them things that they need to help them understand their emotions and how to express them. And so we're going to get ready to go into our breakout session. You're going to have about 8 minutes to talk and discuss in your breakout session. Our prompts are, what are ways that a teacher can make a safe place or help with trauma in students due to COVID? Now we know that COVID is one of the traumas that they have. And we know that children often will not be able to tell you on camera if they're not in person. So on Zoom, what are ways that you're going to look at? And what are ways that in person that you can find out? And finally, you can also discuss how do you recognize trauma in a student who isn't disruptive, but extremely quiet.
Thank you, Arlinda. So we're going to move you into the breakout sessions. You'll have 8 minutes to discuss with your groups. Please make sure you unmute yourself and that you turn your cameras on so that you can see each other and engage with each other. And then also, if you can, take a screenshot of the questions so that you don't forget what the questions are, and use your note catcher as well. Have a good time, and we'll be back in 8 minutes.
And ladies, at the end here, when I have everyone in breakout rooms, there's a few unassigned, so I will manually assign them to a breakout room. But people are accepting, and we're down from 230 participants to 60, so people are going.
They're going, yeah.
Everybody that is not accepted into a breakout room, please look for your prompt so you can get in your breakout room and continue with the discussion.
I didn't get a prompt.
Okay, what is your name?
Nikki Tatum.
Okay, Nikki, I see you and I'm sending you now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're right on time, Arlinda. This is great. You know, it took a little bit because there's so many people on the session, that's awesome, to get them into their breakout session. So maybe should we bring them back like at 2:29? Just add 1 minute?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Is that okay, Kelly?
Hi, Veronica. Did you say something? I'm sorry. I'm getting ready to start another session.
No, I was just saying if it's okay, if instead of bring them back at 2:28, if we can do 2:29, just give them like that 1 extra minute.
Yep, you got it.
Awesome, thank
And
you.
yeah, so if you guys, because there's an overlap, so not quite yet. I'm still good. I'm still with you. I have 10 more minutes before I have to start the TA for the other session, so we're all good.
Okay.
And we're still recording, but just FYI, okay?
So, Arlinda, just in case, you know, you'll, once they come back, you'll take over with the discussion. You'll close it out, and then slide 26. After
Yes.
you're done closing it out with the group, then I'll do my quick less than 1 minute closing.
Okay. Sounds great.
They've been given the 2-minute warning.
Okay, thank you.
I will be closing the rooms, and they will start to come back over the next 60 seconds. "30 seconds, I'm sorry.
Hello, sorry, I got disconnected.
Welcome back, everyone.
Before we get started, I have a quick question about the Attendee Hub. I don't know how to access that.
Once you sign up and you click on the session that you're going to attend, that is your Attendee Hub. So each session that you click on, if you just kind of scroll down, you should be able to see files, and then you'll see like the note catcher, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes,
Arlinda,
thank
take
you
it
so
away.
much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so on
Does
the
it
next
say
slide,
no? Sorry. And that's to download the video?
No, the video you'll be able to see it as soon as this session is over because we're recording it right now.
Where do we go to see it? Like, where do we log
Yeah.
in?
At that same thing. So whenever you click any sessions, that's where you'll see the video.
Great. Okay, thank you.
It's on our next slide. Now that we are out of our breakout sessions, I hope everyone had a good time discussing. One of the most important things that I just dear to my heart are you as educators and people who deal with our children. They are because you are. And so in an article that I was part of writing and being interviewed for the Huffington Post and Thrive Global, one of the things I said is I would change how educators are viewed. And one of the things that was so important to me is because educators are dealing with so much because we want so much for our children. We want them to inherit society. We want to make them successful. And so I would change how you actually are viewed. And I would tell you to know your worth because you are so valuable to the children that you are interacting with every day. I would tell you to know that your well-being is important and that you can't make them great if you are taking in so much stress. And so make sure that you identify things that will help with your own well-being, and then you'll be able to offer support to students. So in order for us to release students to their purpose, this is the thing that I like to do with my students, where I tell them your life has purpose. Your story is important. Your dreams count. Your voice matters. You were born to make an impact. And I try to instill things with them every day to this point, because what we pour in their cup is what we're going to get out. Dare to be chosen. And as educators, I want you to understand that you actually have been chosen to do this job. Your compassion that you bring, everything that you bring to the table is going to impact a student. Dare to be chosen to make a difference. Dare to respond to each student's needs with things that they're familiar with. That's where you get to their history and stuff, where you're reflecting. You don't want to change who they are. You want to embrace who they are, to make them know that everything about them is important. And then finally, you want to reflect who they are and how you speak to them and how you try to say, hey, I'm building a relationship with you because I want to know about you. So dare to be chosen. And know that this won't happen immediately. Sometimes you might see a response in 10 minutes. It might take 10 years, but just know that everything that you are doing, that if you keep on planting it and keep on watering and keep on nurturing, it's eventually going to bloom. And with this, when I saw this picture, it says, my trauma doesn't define me. A lot of times we might want children to do things like we want them to do, and their trauma may be interfering with that, but who they are doesn't define who they're going to be. And so our job is to help them inherit society.
So 275 coming into this account right now.
Just look at who they are and know that one day they're going to grow up to be someone great.
Mic unmute, please.
But that little girl or that little boy will eventually, if we keep on instilling things in them, will grow up to be someone that may end up impacting our own lives. We'll take this time to take a few questions in the chat.
Arlinda, I do have several people who've requested the PowerPoint. I've asked all the participants to reach out directly to you and
Yes.
request. Also, so everyone knows that all of the recordings will be available and you will be notified when they are available so that you can go back and review the presentation.
Thank you so much.
Many
At the
people
end of this presentation, there will be with my information on it. I would love for anyone to reach out to me.
Many people are saying thank you so much. And also we would like everyone to not to forget to use hashtag POE Summit in your social media. Folks said, love the presentation, culturally responsive versus culturally sensitive. Great presentation, thank you. Safe place for remote students. Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If everyone
Well, I
takes
just want to take.
I'll let you thank and close it out.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone for letting me come into your heart, into your house, or wherever you are. Please reach out to me. I love what I do because trauma didn't define who I was. A lot of things I went through now have motivated me to try to speak to other people. And teachers, I absolutely love and adore you for what you do. You are my hero because without you, where would the world be?
Thank you so much, Arlinda, for sharing your time with us and sharing your stories. Thank you all for attending the session. Please make sure to take a quick break before you head into your next session. And then also just a little reminder that you will receive a survey at the end of the day. Please fill it out so we can get your honest feedback about your experience today. Thank you again, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arlinda.
Thank you,
Thank
Arlinda.
Thank you.
You want to go back to my session?
Hi.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Arlinda, for the presentation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Everybody was awesome.
Absolutely.
I'm glad I was able to hop back